You're listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
I'm pretty good. And how about yourself?
Hey, so far so good here in 2021. I mean, the pandemic's still with us, but I see good times ahead, man. Always stay optimistic. How about you?
I say always the optimist, right? I mean, you kind of hope that at some point the corner will turn here, but yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic as well. But I think we're still in for several more months of I guess diligence.
Yeah, due diligence and wearing masks and all that jazz. But I will say this. So when there's an opportunity to get the vaccine, I'm sure most of our listeners don't know my story, but I actually tested positive for COVID back in October. And then in January, my doctor sent me to get a test for the antibodies and tested negative. So I had COVID supposedly, and I don't have the antibodies supposedly. So I'm just going under the assumption that I am not protected. I mean, fortunately, with the way it hit me, at least the first time, assuming it actually did hit me, wasn't that horrible, but it wasn't fun either. So yeah, I'll wait my turn, and when my turn comes up, then I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, I remember that time. It was daily check-ins. How things going? Don't you die on me.
Don't you die
We
on
got
me.
a podcast to do.
We got a lot of work and a podcast to record.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So potentially you had it, but you got none of the benefits, meaning the antibodies off of it. So yeah, as soon as vaccine's available for us, go ahead and grab it. I'm all in for sure. I'll take whatever I can get at this point.
Yeah.
But people don't tune into the Identity Center podcast for hard hitting medical news like that. They tune into this for identity and access management in some way, shape, or form. I think today, we were kind of talking with one of our old friends, and he's going to be on the show with us. We're really kind of talking about digital transformation and identity and access management. And you have to go way, 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 way back in the archives of our show, way back. I think it was episode 7. Luis was with us, and this was way back in the day when he was part of Identropy, and now he's part of Clear Skye, where he's the chief revenue officer. So I want to welcome Luis back to the show. How you doing, Luis?
Doing great, Jeff. Hey, Jim. How are you guys doing?
Good. I thought Jeff was going to say that we had Dr. Fauci, but hey, man, you're still a really good guest. Just kidding.
Well, it's great to be with you guys. Miss you.
Miss you too, man. You're not the only one with a new company, Jeff and I are as well. I'm not sure if we've even mentioned it on any of our other episodes, but our new company, Protivity, acquired Identropy at the end of 2020. And so we've been on this ride. We're recording on January 27th, so almost a month. And how long has it been, Luis, now that you've been at Clear Skye?
So I started at Clear Skye in April. So time flies, right? If you think about it right now, it's January came and is almost gone. I guess it's part of growing old. But yeah, it's coming up on a year.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, you went from a pretty small company in Identropy to a true startup. And what's that been like? I mean, I'm sure as with everything in life, there are pros and cons, but what's it been like for you? Has it been a crazy ride?
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, so John Milburn, who ran One Identity and was with Questel. I worked with him when I was at Quest. He's our CEO. And I'll tell you, because I've never worked for someone that can put so much pressure on me for selling and yet keep such a great sense of humor. And he says, when people ask, hey, how are you doing? He says, we're at a startup, so every day's Friday. You would think that everything's wonderful because you're at a technology startup headquartered in Silicon Valley in one of the fastest growing industries, cybersecurity, identity management. But you realize how much effort that people put into these visionaries that found a company, and then the people that embrace them and build it. It is a lot of work. I mean, I remember early on, John asked me, he goes, what do you want to do with APAC? And being the sales guy that I am, I said, let's go for it, man. I mean, if we could get a couple deals out there, that would be great. And we did. We have a very, very interesting reference account in Australia. First deal that we've done with Accenture, which for us was, really important. But I'm taking calls at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then getting up, 6:30, 7 in the morning, and already have an inbox full of emails from the team in Europe. So I'm not complaining. It's amazing, but hats off to all of those that have come and gone before us and then have succeeded in building a business, including Victor at Identropy and all the things you guys have done. And congratulations on the Protivity thing. Really. How's that going for you guys?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, I feel like from my seat, not much has changed. And I know that's probably not the shared seat of everybody, but at least I'm working with a lot of the customers that I worked with prior, either in a pre-sales or actually consulting way, and still working on, kind of tails of projects that started prior. Definitely, I mean, I see the things that will change from kind of a corporate standpoint. Even though Identropy wasn't a startup, it wasn't a very big company, so we didn't have like a different system for everything. And obviously, with big companies, that's exactly how it is. But at least, one of the great things I think is the opportunity that I'm seeing is that there are so many folks who are, in other areas of information security or technology, or not even in technology. And it opens up doors for clients that, I was always impressed when we were at Identropy that we could be a small company that, definitely wasn't a household name. And the household marquee brands that we would kind of, step into on a regular basis and could be consulting to household name kind of companies. And, it just seems like those doors are opening even more at Protivity. So I'm excited about it because what I'd love to be able to do is provide my experience and my advice, in advisory services. I'd like to map that back to what advisory is. It's advice. And I like to be able to give that advice to as many folks as possible. That's why we do the podcast, is to kind of get that information out there, but also work in kind of and helping those clients be successful. And, I think we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, which is stay one step ahead of the folks who are looking to pull off exploits and data breaches and things like that. We're also looking to create a better customer experience. And that's one of the things I love about information security is that it's kind of less guarded from the standpoint of, everybody trying to get a competitive advantage. It's not really the competitive advantage of security. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And people, in my experience, have been pretty open to sharing their stories and sharing, their methods to succeed. So what do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think it's always a change, right? When you go from a very small company to, from 50 people to like 7,000, right? So, navigating some of the processes around that. But at the end of the day, the job is still the same. It's like you said, it's providing advice, providing opinion. And I think it's a great job, right? You get you're basically paid to provide an opinion. And we want to make that opinion based on as much fact and real world experience as possible. And I think that's where it makes it really easy for for yourself, me, and the other members of our team, like Maida, to be able to kind of do that.
And I certainly was excited when I heard, and the reason for that is, so first of all, just a little bit of background. I mean, not to make this about Clear Skye, but for context, Clear Skye, we've developed an identity governance and administration tool natively on the ServiceNow platform. So fundamentally, we're a ServiceNow product, right? It's a ServiceNow user experience. And also for those that are integrating IGA using our product, it's ServiceNow skills. And as I was building out the channel, a friend of mine at ServiceNow who manages their risk channel, so their partners that do governance, risk, and compliance, she pointed me to Protivity in Italy. And she said, Protiviti in Italy is one of the partners that is doing the best GRC work. So I immediately called those guys, tremendous amount of ServiceNow experience. And, when I heard that Identropy was becoming a part of Protiviti, I called Victor up and I said, Vic, we're really going to be able to do some great things now, because identity is about process, right? How do you automate access to applications, or how do you govern that access? And if you think about it, it's all a process. And ServiceNow is about process automation, right? Making workflow better, making that user experience better. So if we take those identity processes and we move them onto the ServiceNow platform, the execution of that really is about ServiceNow resources. And the concept that you have an identity practitioner, such as yourselves, that understand how to ask the right questions, right? To understand the company's business process, to optimize it. Then what you can do with the Protiviti is you can lean on the ServiceNow bench to then automate what you guys are discovering and recommending. And I think that's a value there that we see Protiviti bringing to the identity space and complementing the skills that Identropy had.
Well, thanks. And one thing that I've been thinking about is exactly that convergence of technology and business, and what we're seeing over and over again with our clients as they're engaging these digital transformation efforts, and identity is kind of right at the center of those digital transformation efforts. You can't get very far until you have control over that customer and the 360-degree view of the customer. But I've kind of had in my mind the digital transformation approach. There's kind of two bookends to it. There's the best of breed approach, where you have 100 different applications, and you took the best application for each one of those functions, and you're trying to pull them all together. And then there's the total opposite end, which is you say, this is the platform that we want to go on, whether it's Salesforce or ServiceNow or Microsoft or whatever, and that becomes what you build your application portfolio. And what I find probably the most is everyone somewhere in between, but they sort of trend one direction or the other. Wanted to get your thoughts on that, and then also just to mention, I think when I first started hearing the digital transformation term, and still where I hear it the most is around the customer IAM, but I think it's just as relevant for companies transforming digitally internally as well. So talk a little bit about the digital transformation and kind of the ServiceNow as a platform approach, and kind of where you guys fit into that.
So I won't speak for every identity practitioner. I'll speak for myself and say that, I've been in the identity governance space for 15 years, and whether we like it or not, we become very myopic, right? It's all about identity governance all day, all night, and that's it. Moving to Clear Skye, what I've come to realize is that there could be a different way to define the value around IGA than the one I was accustomed to. I always told customers that identity governance was about two main value propositions. One was IT optimization, which would be through provisioning and the automation of granting of that access. And the other one would be enhanced security through governance, access reviews, etc. Well, ServiceNow somewhat opened my eyes to the fact that if you look at those two value propositions, both of them are really about user experience. Whether I'm a new user, a new employee being onboarded and having to gain access to systems, that process is a user experience, a new employee user experience, which is even more critical. Or whether I'm an employee where I'm reviewing access or I'm requesting access, that is also a user experience. And what ServiceNow's messaging and their value proposition to the market showed me is that user experience is about productivity, and that user experience is really an enabling factor in a business. And that's what digital transformation is all about. What I'm learning is that companies, as they digitally transform, what they're trying to do is change the way that they're dealing with customers and dealing with employees. And they're looking for ways to maximize those interactions. And once we start to think about identity in that capacity, right, and you start to think about the role that knowing who the user is, what they have access to, who they report to, when they gain those access, when they gain that access, those are things that can become a fundamental building block as you change the way you're interacting with employees and customers.
Yeah, I think the user experience is something that you bring up that's always been near and dear to my heart. And I've been involved with holy wars on the inside of an enterprise with what does that user experience look like? And a lot of times it revolves around access requests, because that's kind of the front door for IAM for a lot of organizations, and how people are going to consume those services. So it used to be, right, there's two choices. Either you put it in your IAM platform, or in this case, really what we're talking about specifically is identity governance platform, something like a SailPoint, a Savient, a Clear Skye, something along those lines, right? Or do you put it into the IT request management platform, right? Maybe it's Remedy, or maybe it's ServiceNow, right? And that was always a struggle internally as to who is going to be responsible for that. And sometimes there's a lot of kingdom building that takes place between different services, but because it's pretty rare that your IT request tool is going to be run by the same people who are running your identity and access management tools. So I used to be very much a proponent of put it in the IGA tool. That's what it's designed for. It has the workflows, it has the approval steps, et cetera. And that was probably true 10 years ago, maybe even longer. But I think that products like ServiceNow and others have come along and greatly improved their user interfaces at this point, where there is a lot of feature parity, and it makes sense now to consider just putting it into the IT request tool, which is, obviously how Clear Skye has positioned itself, putting it in within the ServiceNow platform, which makes a lot of sense. So if you already have development capability and technical chops around your IT request tool, and you can put your access requests in there, and it's in a manner that is good for the user from an experience perspective, and can be updated in a way where you don't have to worry about stale Active Directory groups showing up and people requesting things that probably don't exist anymore, things like that, right? It's some sort of dynamic way to be able to keep that data updated, that it makes a lot of sense. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been, taking into account that sort of internal struggle that has been one of the historical factors of a lot of request management processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it would make sense if you think about it, right? Access requests back in the day before the IGA platforms would have originated in that request system. And over time, it specialized and it became independent. And most of our IGA use cases that are integrated with an access request system, it's just that, right? It's like an ITSM integration. And when I first started working with Clear Skye and understanding the platform, I thought, great, we have a better integration with ITSM because we're native. There's no need for an integration module. But what I've come to understand is that ServiceNow is much more than the by far leading ITSM service request product. Really what it is now, and under Bill McDermott, the new CEO, it's really an app engine, a digital transformation engine. So Clear Skye IGA on the ServiceNow platform is really not about integration with ITSM, although that's there. It's really about enabling and powering the platform. And what I mean by that is that on that platform today, you're going to have products like or processes that are being run, workloads like CMDB or GRC, which they call IRM, right? They have security operations products like vulnerability management products. They have cloud operation management products. They have asset management products. So what's missing? I mean, in my mind, a gaping hole would be, identity information, getting that identity information and making it available to those other processes that are being run. And GRC is probably the best example that I can think of. But not only that, making the data in those other products available to the IGA product. For instance, before provisioning, I might go and check the CMDB before I make a workflow approval decision on whether the user should have that access or not. So what's interesting is the platform becomes increasingly more valuable as there are more and more processes being run on that platform.
Luis, is identity governance in an ITSM system only for small and mid-sized businesses? Is it going to handle the complexity of a large enterprise?
Jim, that is to me the most surprising thing. And the way you phrased that question was perfect, is that when I first started looking at Clear Skye, I thought, okay, great. This is going to be a mid-market, small enterprise product. People that have been doing a greenfield, we're going to be able to be a little faster, a little cheaper, a little better because we're in the cloud, better workflow, et cetera. What I've come to learn is that most of the attention we're getting, thank goodness, I mean, this is like, it added a zero to our business plan, is from the large enterprise. And there are lots of different examples. Like right now, we're engaged with a very large healthcare system, and they have one of the legacy products. And by legacy, I mean the old school IBM, CA, Oracle, et cetera, right? And all they want us to do, Jim, is request. They want us to take the entitlement catalog from that legacy system, move it up to the platform, and allow the users to be able to request entitlements on the Now platform and leave that legacy system in place to provision to Epic, which we all know how complicated that is. We have a very large bank that has one of, I don't want to give away the bank if I say too much, but very large Oracle implementation, huge. Oracle is doing all of the provisioning. They're setting out now to tackle the governance aspect, and we're doing that component. And then we just closed a very well-known hedge fund that had a very well-developed, and I hate to mention the product, but what the leading product that comes to mind, the on-premise version, which is incredibly flexible. And they said, look, we're digitally transforming. We've got to move this to the cloud. The cloud product doesn't meet our needs, and we want this on service now. So yes, and that's really the most surprising. And I'll be the first to admit that we have some gaps, right? For instance, we have 20 connectors available today, or 15 and 20. Competition has hundreds. We're developing advanced functionality like segregation of duty rules, so we don't have everything that you would expect. But I'm surprised, or people are surprised, with how much we have. And that large enterprise looks at us and says, I can live with your gaps because this is a low-code, no-code platform, extremely flexible. So I can take the solution that you guys have built inside ServiceNow and build upon it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. What's the driver that these, in your experience, the customer base you're talking to, what is the driver for them? Is it enablement? Is it reducing costs? Is it something else? What do you think?
I really think it's about, I hate to say it, right? Like that buzzword digital transformation, which let's start bringing that down. It's user experience. Is it the customer user experience? Is it the employee user experience? And break that down even further. That's productivity. That's becoming more competitive in the market. A lot of the analysts I'm talking to, and also, people on the SI side that have been doing this a long time, they say, look, IGA is long in the tooth, right? They killed the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We're now in the, whatever it is, the market guide, because we've entered the plateau of productivity. And the SIs are saying to me, look, there is very little value add that we can bring beyond like application onboarding and adding a ton of connectors to bring a ton of applications into the fold. You guys are offering a ton of opportunity for us to innovate because now identity is on the platform and we can do use cases that span multiple products. We can add value that we couldn't before. And Jim, I think, also to a degree from a selfish perspective for them, they are now going to be able to tap into budgets that are probably 10x an identity budget, right? Like if you go talk to a large bank or a large telco, you say, what's your identity and access management budget? And you say, what's your digital transformation budget?
Mm-hmm.
It's significantly bigger.
Yeah, you know what I always see with digital transformation is it starts by saying, "Wow, we've got all this data about our customers. It's in all these different silos. We have to come up with a 360-degree view." Another cliche, 360-degree view of our customer. Cliche, but it's spot on, right? You really need. What's more annoying than when you go and do business with a company and they only, it's like, okay, in this application they only know part way about me. They don't know about my whole relationship. Well, pulling all that together requires taking those data silos and being able to say, all right, Jeff Stedman is these different identities across these different data silos and pull it together until you can get to a point where you can consolidate it. If you go that platform strategy and succeed and move all the data and actually join all the data. But in the meantime, governance of the identity is kind of making that linkage. I would think that that's a really big selling point for the platform digital transformation, IGA sales strategy.
I think that's huge. I've got someone very close to me. He's CTO of a very large packaged goods company. And he said that their whole mission in life right now is to ethically acquire, user data and user buying tendencies and how they're doing things differently, because they have this route to market, right? They have this relationship with retailers and with consumers. So now they're thinking, because of the digital era we're in, how do we further capitalize on that mind share we have from the consumer and the retailer? What are other things that we can make better in their lives? What type of data or information can we make available to them that would make us the natural company for them to buy other goods and services and products from? We're seeing that transformation in fintech, right? I think Amazon for me was the first that I saw that where I'm willing to pay more because Amazon's making the right recommendations, has all my credit cards on file, delivers in 2 days. Like I forget I bought something and the product's at my house.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's really what it's all about. And also, Jim, the other trend, right, is cloud. So if you think about us, maybe, in like kind of crossing the chasm, we're in a fad. The real smart people, the cool kids know we exist. They're really interested in us. And thank goodness, we're taking on a lot of momentum, but we're a fad within the trend of digital transformation, right? And also movement to cloud. And if you guys remember, right, the identity space where we always had legacy last mile connectors. Like if you remember, man, we'd be like, I'd always say like, okay, cloud's great, but what about this stuff that's still on-prem legacy? And what I observed being an identity practitioner was, okay, well, people are moving to the cloud application by application. Salesforce, CRM. All right, well, let's get rid of these old servers. Let's go there. HR, Workday, right? Let's get rid of these servers and move to Workday. And what I think the platform vendors today, like Microsoft, right, or the app dev engines, which are Microsoft, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and OutSystems, which is a kind of a no-name one, but they're saying move everything to me, automate your processes on our platform. You could do it all here, and that way you have kind of lower costs across all your functions because it's all the same resources.
And I think that plays in too with the general consolidation that we've been seeing in the IAM space, with companies kind of spinning off different parts and being acquired by former competitors, things like that. I'm thinking of like CyberArk and Centrify and Idaptive, for example. I think that consolidation is going to continue to happen, obviously. One of the things I want to go back and touch on real quick is, the mentioning of the silos of data, right? And that is a historical problem that is very difficult to solve for. And the further you kick that can down the curb, the harder it gets to fix. So
yeah,
it also is a privacy concern for a lot of folks now because of the potential types of data that could be stored and how it's used. And you've got things like the California protection, privacy protection, things like GDPR. And, at some point, I would imagine in the US, at least, there will probably be something very similar to GDPR coming along. And the way that companies and organizations are storing all of that data across all of those silos has become very difficult to manage. So the challenge from an IAM perspective there is, how do you bridge those silos and get to that single source of truth, and make the data available to the appropriate parties when it's needed for whatever purposes are being used, but also give the user or the customer, or however you want to look at it, the ability to manage their own data. I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for a lot of organizations that have not really had to deal with that yet, but are absolutely going to have to at some point in the future. And by simplifying and reducing the number of disparate silos of identity data, it's going to make it a lot easier. So I just kind of want to go back on that one real quick. And then, I talked about that consolidation. I think you were kind of getting into it too with, these low code, no code solutions, and, people building processes on that, and then having businesses and people within the business willing to adapt, right, their daily processes to be able to take advantage of those technologies. Because that's always one of the hardest things is, change is hard, right? This is the way you've always done it. I've always, sent a fax to somebody for some access or some, request, and this is just the way we do it. And before that, it used to be, I used to stop by someone's desk, or maybe it's, an instant message. And now it's this new way that is, maybe more self-service. I love the Amazon example because, that in my mind is a great example of a user-friendly process, right? It just works. No one trained you how to use Amazon, right? You just went on, you bought the thing you needed, and it was intuitive enough where you figured it out. And then, like you said, 2 days later, and maybe even earlier than that,
Yeah.
the thing showed up at your door. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to take that model and, apply it to services from an IAM perspective.
So when you were speaking, the question that came to my mind is, like, does this remind you at all of when PCI regulation came about? Remember? And it was this whole struggle for retailers and others to offboard all of that credit card information. Yep. It almost could be that we're kind of seeing similar trends, which is, are there easier ways for me to manage my data? Is the platform, this move towards the platform, a way to break down these silos? And honestly, Jeff, I'm not that smart. I'm not that close to digital transformation to be able to answer that question. But what I do know is that our process, which is access request, review, and provisioning, is really, really benefits tremendously from being up there. And I think other processes that we're looking at, in fact, and I don't think IGA will be the only thing, you can say, I know it won't. Imagine PAM up on a ServiceNow platform very close to ITSM with the CMDB available. There's just a richness of information up there.
It's interesting. I thought where you're going with that, Luis, was, are companies going to look for a way to offload identity like they did with the credit card data? And I think that would be to their detriment. I mean, I think the social login idea has a lot of benefit. And for some companies, maybe it makes a lot of sense. But I think it's something like, when Facebook acquired WhatsApp, and they paid some exorbitant amount of money, like $3 billion for an app, at least in the US, that we weren't using that much. It wasn't that they were buying the technology. The technology was okay. It wasn't $3 billion worth of technology. It was all the identity data. Because once they had that identity data and they could apply their artificial intelligence to all the data they were collecting about people, they could make money off of that data. And I think that's what smart companies have to do. They have to be able to take identity data, apply, I'm calling it artificial intelligence. That's certainly the buzz term, but they've got to apply some intelligence around what people are all about in order to, turn that into revenue in the future.
Jim, you said it much better than I could have. You just nailed it. You just said, companies need to take that identity data and wrap things around it like AI. Well, guess what's up on that platform? They have an AI module, right? That identity data is up there. Can we do anything around vulnerability management with that data? Right. So it's just like a nexus of processing and workloads and information. I mean, it's almost like I'm not saying this is true, but thought came to mind right now. It's almost as if the centralization of these processes on a platform resembles mainframe. And if you remember the decentralization off the mainframe to distributed, maybe what we're seeing is a similar process to those platforms in the cloud.
I wanted to ask a question to kind of wrap things up. I've been reflecting on the name of this podcast, Identity at the Center, and it's something I truly believe from a information security perspective, but I think it's also, I'm thinking about it today in terms of the digital transformation perspective. Identity truly is at the center from a security perspective. When you think about something like the concept of zero trust, which, when zero trust first came out, I kind of thought, okay, this is kind of buzzy and things. And what about firewalls? And we've been talking to some folks, and really, I just starting to understand that zero trust doesn't mean you don't need firewalls, right? It just means that you can't just rely on firewalls, right? And then when you break down that level of comfort that people on the outside of the firewall are outsiders and people on the inside are insiders, and we can, and certainly with the pandemic, we've seen that all fall to pieces. To me, it's the identity and the identity control plane that really gives you your best sense of security. It's not DLP. It's not, network intrusion prevention, things like that. It's identity and access management. But also thinking from a digital transformation perspective and what we were talking about earlier, it's, digital transformation means a whole bunch of different things to different people. It could be replatforming applications. It could be coming up with new technology for master data management or customer data management. It can be all these things. But until you really have your arms around the identity of whoever it is, your customer, whether those are your employees or those are people buying your products, so you have your arms around them and understand relationships between them and, where all your data is for that identity, and you're able to pull it together. To me, you can't succeed in the digital transformation. So to me, it's just one more reason identity is at the center. I wanted to throw that out there and get your thoughts before we close it out.
I love that concept of identity at the center, right? I mean, I think our team at Identropy, we did a lot of work around that. The question I have now is, where's the center? Where do you want the center to be? And if you look at companies like Microsoft, right, and that's the first one that comes to mind, or Salesforce, or ServiceNow, where if you plot this trend out, let's assume that this trend is actually victorious, and organizations, instead of 200 vendors, have like 3, 4, 5 platform vendors. Like pendulum swings all the way over to the other side from distributed and decentralized. That will be the center. And that's where you want identity, not on some authentication authorization platform or some convoluted, complicated cloud PAM platform or something like that. You want it at the center where most of your workloads are being processed. And that's what's so exciting, Jim, man. And that's why I'm happy to be where I'm at. And I'm so privileged to be speaking with you and Jeff and getting the band back together again, because I think the Protiviti thing for you guys is a similar trend. Now your identity expertise can be at the center of Protiviti, which has much more reach, much more breadth, and can provide much more value to your customers. So congratulations.
Well, thank you, man. I think that is the opportunity. And when I think about this industry, and I've been in this industry since 2003, it's funny that some of the folks that we've had on the podcast were stars in the industry back in 2003. So 2003 sounds like a lot, but it's really not. But the thing is, I think, identity for some people becomes a stop along the way. And to be able to have stayed in this industry for as long as we have and kind of see it grow and for it to have survived, right? When I first got into IT, I was real into network computing and setting up servers and things like that. And to me, that's still happening, but a lot of that just at the enterprise level just gets outsourced. Identity is still kind of so crucial to the business that I don't see it going away as in terms of being a discipline that is really important. And to your point now, in a bigger organization where there's so much of a focus on security and privacy, kind of the epicenter of all that, it still ties back to identity. So it just creates more additional opportunity.
Amen. And it's like, we didn't pick the identity life. The identity life picked us. And I sure am grateful for it, guys.
I think that's a common theme that we've asked everyone who's come on the show, did it pick you or did you pick it? And I don't know. I don't have official numbers, but I'm going to say at least 90% have come through and said, identity picked them. And, I'll go with it too. And I think, before we close out here, identity at the center, I think you can be at the center of whatever you want it to be. I think it's flexible enough that depending on the use case, depending on the problem you're trying to solve, that there's enough flexibility there to be able to work it in some way.
I just came up with a new tagline: identity everywhere. Identity everywhere. How's that?
That sounds like a real nightmare for somebody who's in the identity field.
That's right. Sorry, I take it back. That's why you guys are the advisors. But guys, again, man, thank you guys so much for inviting me. It's just, I love the conversation. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, so just, talking IAM amongst old friends. Hopefully at some point we'll be back in Vegas enjoying eating a nice cut of Wagyu steak. I think it was the last time I saw you back at the end of 2019, I guess would have been for Gartner.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get back together at some point. Before we close things out, any final words of wisdom from you, Luis?
Oh my gosh, absolutely not. But I hope there was some value. Definitely for me, catching up with old friends was valuable. So again, signing off. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Luis. Jim, anything you want to close with?
Well, you got me thinking about Wagyu steak, and I will say Wagyu steak on somebody else's credit card is better than Wagyu steak on my own credit card. I will say that. Wow, we had some really good steaks in Vegas at the 2019 Gartner IAM Summit. But like I always close out with Jeff, I mean, we are honored to have the listeners that we have and want to connect with them. And I say the best way to do that, at least for me, is on LinkedIn. So if you listen to the show and you're interested in connecting and networking, just go ahead and send me a connection and I'll be thrilled to accept it and respond back to you.
Yeah, same here. I'm always happy to connect with folks who are listening and just in the identity space in general and just, talk. I'll throw our LinkedIn connection information into the show notes and we'll put links there for Luis and for Clear Skye as well, so you guys can check them out. And I think with that, we're going to go ahead and close it out for this week. Appreciate everyone listening, and we'll talk with y'all on the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.